In this video and the next several videos, we focus on aldehydes and on ketones, two important functional groups in biology, medicine, and health. So in this video, our focus will be on learning to recognize these two functional groups, and we'll discuss a bit of introductory material about their applications. First things first, when we are discussing aldehyde and ketone groups, it's important for us to be able to recognize and distinguish between those groups and pick out those groups relative to others that we have looked at. When we refer to an aldehyde, what we are discussing as the absolute prerequisite for a molecule to be described as having an aldehyde functional group is it has to have a carbonyl. Remember that a carbonyl is the atoms that make up this carbon-oxygen double bond there. We refer to that as a carbonyl if you are specifically referring to just the carbon-oxygen double bond. In order for the group to be referred to as an aldehyde, it has to have a carbonyl directly bonded to a hydrogen atom. Over here on the left of this particular molecule, our R could be either a carbon atom or a hydrogen atom there. If it was a hydrogen, that would make this a one-carbon aldehyde, known as formaldehyde for what it's worth. So aldehyde absolutely, positively has to have as the prerequisite for being an aldehyde molecule this group shown here, carbonyl directly bonded to a hydrogen atom. A ketone, on the other hand, also has a carbonyl, making it similar to an aldehyde. However, in the case of a ketone, the carbonyl group that we've just drawn is directly connected to two other carbon atoms. So here, our R groups, here and here, have to begin with carbon atoms. They could be as simple as having a CH3 on each side of the carbonyl group, or they could be long chains, they could be rings. Whatever the case might be, what absolutely has to be present in order for the structure to be referred to as a ketone is it has to have a carbonyl directly bonded on both sides to carbon atoms here. If there's an oxygen on one side or a hydrogen on one side, then it is no longer a ketone, but it is some other functional group. We cover aldehydes and ketones together in the same chapter because they share many of the same chemical and physical properties. One reason why they have so many properties and similar is because of the carbonyl group. And you'll notice in the case of each of these, the carbonyl group is bonded to R groups, which are carbons and or hydrogens, depending upon whether the molecule is an aldehyde or a ketone. Carbon and hydrogen has relatively similar polarity, meaning a similar propensity to pull electron density in this bond away from the carbon atom here, making the behavior of these aldehydes and ketones very similar to one another. One of the key reasons for the particular chemical and physical properties that we'll observe for these molecules has to do with the carbonyl group. In particular, in the carbonyl group, the oxygen atom is a far more polar atom than carbon, meaning that the oxygen is going to pull electron density toward itself and away from the carbon. That's going to give the oxygen atom a strong negative polarization, which I represent as delta negative. And the carbon, on the other hand, since the carbon is deficient in electrons because the oxygen is hogging them, will take on a positive polarization. So the bond here is one in which the electrons are not evenly shared between the two atoms. Instead, oxygen has the lion's share of the electrons from that bond, and carbon is left deficient. This observation that the oxygen is negatively polarized and the carbon is positively polarized is further intensified by a phenomenon called resonance, which is beyond the scope of this class, but refers to the situation where the electrons can actually be shown not just as a pi bond here, but actually shown up on the oxygen as well in a second Lewis structure for this. Like I said, resonance is a bit beyond the scope of this particular class, but what you should be aware of is that the oxygen will be negatively polarized, the carbon will be positively polarized, and this is going to have important implications related to the physical properties of these molecules, such as their melting points and boiling points and water solubilities. It will also have important implications for the chemical properties, meaning how these molecules are going to react, and we will see some definite similarities in the types of reactions that aldehydes and ketones undergo. Now, with that groundwork laid, let's take a look at some of the applications of aldehydes and ketones and how they play into health, nutrition, food science, and a variety of other fields. As one example of applications related to aldehydes and ketones, this molecule, shown here, known as benzaldehyde, the aldehyde name there gives it away. Benz referring to the benzene ring here, where we have the black atoms representing carbons with the double bond, single bond, double bond pattern, telling us this is an aromatic ring, and these white atoms here are hydrogens. Branching off of this, we have an aldehyde group, this being our carbon in black, and then that red atom with a double bond there is the oxygen atom of a carbonyl, and then again the white atom here represents a hydrogen. So this group up here in the upper right-hand corner represents our aldehyde group, carbonyl, directly bonded to a hydrogen, which by the way we can abbreviate as a CHO group as our shorthand way of referring to an aldehyde group. Benzaldehyde is interesting because it is the flavoring component that gives an almond flavor. So benzaldehyde typically has a flavor of almond. Some would describe it more as a cherry-like flavor, represented and caused by the way that this molecule interacts with your taste receptors. Benzaldehyde isn't the only aldehyde or ketone that we could describe which has flavorant property. This molecule, as the name suggests, vanillin, is the component that gives vanilla its distinctive flavoring. As we look at this structure, we see again the common theme here, much like with benzaldehyde, that there is an aldehyde group present in vanillin, and we should be able to recognize that aldehyde group. Much like benzaldehyde, vanillin also has an aromatic ring here where each of the carbon atoms of the ring is marked off with a blue dot here. Vanillin differs from benzaldehyde because while benzaldehyde has simply an aromatic ring with an aldehyde group attached, vanillin is a more complex structure that has an ether group here, carbon, oxygen, carbon motif, and a hydroxy group or an alcohol group present here in this phenol type system that we see here where we have an aromatic ring directly bonded to our alcohol group. So we refer to this structure as vanillin. This molecule is produced naturally, so if you use natural vanilla, vanillin is what's present there. Likewise, if you buy artificial vanilla flavoring, vanillin is the compound that's been synthesized in a laboratory and is provided there as well. This molecule, known as cinnamaldehyde, you can perhaps guess the use of. It is what gives cinnamon its flavor and fragrance. As we look at the structure, we have our 6 atoms of the aromatic ring, and then that's drawn as a skeletal formula, and then drawn out here as a structural formula is a carbon-carbon double bond making an alkene, and then here we have our carbon-oxygen double bond connected to a hydrogen atom. So we can mark that off as our aldehyde group within this particular molecule. And each of these groups, that is the aromatic ring connected to the carbon-carbon double bond and then a single bond linking over to the aldehyde group, are essential for the cinnamon flavor that this confers. So based on these 3 structures, you would be accurate in concluding that aldehydes are common flavors and fragrances. In addition to the importance of aldehyde molecules, ketones also play key roles in medicine and in health. One example of this is so-called ketone bodies. Ketone bodies are metabolites that will replace glucose as the main fuel of the brain if the brain is under a state of glucose scarcity. For example, during prolonged fasting, during extenuating exercise, or during pathological conditions such as type 1 diabetes. This is one thing that happens during the so-called keto diet, is a forced condition of ketone bodies replacing glucose as the main fuel of the brain. And some of the ketone bodies have structures such as this. The reason we call these ketone bodies is because you will notice each of them, with the exception of the hydroxybutyric acid, have at least one ketone group. We should by this point be able to pick those ketone groups out, remembering that a ketone group has a carbonyl directly connected to carbons on each side. We can recognize that acetone is an example of a ketone, and it is a key ketone body. Aceto, acetic acid, is a molecule that is also presents a ketone functional group here, where we have a carbonyl directly connected to a carbon atom over here on the left, that's a methyl group, and also directly connected to a carbon atom on the right here, making that a ketone group. Now be careful the group that we see to the far right here, where we do have a carbonyl group as well, would not be a ketone group. That's a carboxylic acid group. But this is still representative of a molecule that's a ketone functional group. It just has one additional functional group there as well. Beta-hydroxybutyric acid, which is also a molecule that accumulates in cases where carbohydrates are very limited, is a molecule that is absent in any ketone groups. But what has happened here is that the carbonyl group of acetoacetic acid has been reduced, meaning that one of these bonds to oxygen has been lost to give this hydroxy group here. And this is one of the reactions that we will discuss as we go through this chapter, is the reduction of carbonyl groups from ketones and aldehydes to give alcohols as their products. And those types of reactions tie directly into how ketone bodies accumulate within the body. And it also ties in directly to how the body eliminates ketone bodies through urine. So with these variety of examples of the importance of aldehydes and ketones in biology and health, let's now jump into some of the later videos where we'll look at how we go about naming aldehydes and ketones so that we can recognize those molecules. We'll look at the physical properties of those, including their melting points, their boiling points, and their water solubility, because those features have important implications about how the body processes those compounds and passes them out of the body. And then we will also look at important reactions of aldehydes and ketones, particularly ones that are relevant to medicine and health. That is, oxidation and reduction reactions of these molecules, and also reactions that form a type of group called a hemiacetal and an acetyl group, which are key to carbohydrate chemistry and biology. So stay tuned for that in the upcoming videos.